In 1975, an Ohio man named Ricky Jackson was sentenced to life behind bars, where he remained for 39 years until his conviction was overturned. The sole witness was a 13-year-old boy who said that they personally saw him take a life. When the boy tried to take back his statement, he said the police wouldn't listen and went on with the prosecution anyway. Only much later, when a news reporter began putting pressure on the case, was a reinvestigation launched. Detectives discovered that police had intimidated the boy when he tried to take back what he said. His testimony was the only shred of evidence that they had, which means it was time to let Ricky go.
All right, this case will be dismissed. Mr. Jackson, you're going to be free to go. I wish you good luck.
Thank you, Your Honor.
The exchange is short and without much emotion, but when Ricky Jackson looks up above, you can tell he takes a second to thank his maker for finally being found innocent. He retains his composure for nearly the whole time, and only once when talking about his family does he nearly break down.
But I'm dying to meet him. I want to embrace him and hug him. Excuse me. Because we've been through a lot together.
He is truly a brave man, not only for having endured so many decades of mistreatment, but for coming out of the ordeal with such a remarkable amount of dignity and self-restraint. A former star linebacker at Long Beach Polytechnical High School had his reputation and his promising career as a pro athlete trashed by a false accusation that put him behind bars for 5 years. Brian Banks was being scouted by 8 colleges when at the age of 16 a childhood friend said he had relations without her permission. According to Brian, they went to a spot where couples go and nothing serious happened. Nobody believed him, especially not the judge, and it wasn't until he secretly recorded his accuser taking back what she said that he got any justice. He collapses with exhaustion after his conviction is overturned. He had spent almost 6 years behind bars at this point and is so tired, but his shaking fist shows his determination to stay in the battle for his freedom. Brian Banks never gave up on his dreams. In 2013, he briefly played on the Atlanta Falcons. He was also awarded $1.5 million in a decision against his old high school for their role in his wrongful conviction. He is now on the advisory board of the California Innocence Project, an organization that paid for his legal expenses and helped get his sentence overturned. David Ranta spent 22 years behind bars for a conviction he did not deserve. He was one of the many men framed by a crooked detective who is believed to have fabricated evidence where none was to be found. This is what the judge has to say. Tell me if you would accept her apology if you were David Ranta.
Mr. Ranta, to say that I'm sorry for what you have endured would be an understatement and grossly inadequate. But I say it to you anyway.
The innocent man humbly says thank you. He's probably a better man than I am because I think I would be way more upset.
Ranta mouth, thank you.
He did receive $6.5 million as a result for his wrongful imprisonment though. So aside from his newfound freedom, maybe a large cash settlement makes it easier to forgive. Jack McCullough was accused of being responsible for the mysterious disappearance of a girl who went missing in 1957 and never was found. Detectives waited for decades until 2012 to accuse Jack McCullough of doing it, who was by then an old man. He was found guilty despite strong evidence otherwise. The conviction was overturned when court records showed that he was 40 miles from where the girl went missing. He was signing up to the U.S. Air Force on the night it happened. His alibi checked out when phone records proved that he had called his house from a payphone in the exact area he claimed to be at the time. Now much older, the grown man looks quiet and solemn while facing the judge, which is not surprising after such a miserable experience with judges in the past. But when he looks over at his family and says the word love in sign language, he looks restored, ready to resume happiness despite all of the lost years. So it seems his spirit is still intact and ready to begin anew. A man in Jacksonville, Florida, and his uncle kissed the ground as free men after being released for something they never did. Nathan Myers was put behind bars as an 18-year-old. He is now 62. All he can do is quietly shake his head in disbelief at the idea of finally being let go. A critical piece of evidence went missing, so when the time came for a reinvestigation, there was nothing to prove that Nathan Myers and his uncle were guilty. Nathan was originally denied compensation, but years later successfully fought for $2 million in restitution. A Texas man named John Earl Nally spent 19 years behind bars after being accused of a capital offense in 1996. He is a 44-year-old man upon getting released, so roughly half of his life was wrongly spent in a cell. New DNA evidence shows that he was not the person responsible for going into a woman's apartment and doing something horrible to her. An eyewitness also later admitted to lying, otherwise he would still be wrongfully imprisoned. The first thing he does is hug his lawyer, who he is truly thankful for. The state of Texas awards him $1.5 million, which helps ease the pain, but would you be willing to trade your youth for that kind of money? I surely would not, and I'm sorry that he had to. A man named Ladera Watkins lost 42 years of his life to a wrongful conviction in Detroit when authorities accused him of making a teacher disappear. He was only 19. A reinvestigation shows that the evidence gathered from the scene did not contain a strand of hair linking back to Ladera Watkins as previously claimed. A person in the trial also took back their statements, so basically there was no evidence left to hold him on.
I expected for this to happen. I didn't think it would take 41 plus years, but here we are, and we're just fulfilling what's supposed to happen.
It's amazing to me that he was able to remain optimistic over the decades and always thought he would be set free. It is this same determination that allowed him to research the laws and take the necessary steps to restore his good name. Ricky Davis was released from custody after serving 14 years of a life sentence for something he did not do to a 54-year-old woman in 1985. He was only released because DNA evidence of another suspect was found on the nightgown she was wearing, DNA that did not match Ricky's, therefore it could not be him. Unfortunately, this reinvestigation was not launched until 2018, and Ricky was convicted in late 2005. He hugs his family in front of news cameras as a free man for the first time in years. You can tell by the love they share that his family never gave up on him and was there the entire time. Sadly, many others do not have such loving arms to welcome them after their conviction is overturned, so I'm glad Ricky does. A Cleveland man loses 29 years of his life before the courts finally come to their senses and turn him loose. Raymond Towler does not exactly return the judge's courteous smile, and I can't say I blame him.
Raymond Towler. Good morning, Mr. Towler.
Good morning, sir.
Mr. Towler is present with all of the attorneys.
He is respectful, but most of all probably just wants to get this over with the help of an organization known as the Innocence Project. Raymond Towler was able to file the necessary paperwork to have the DNA retested using modern technology. The DNA was found to belong to somebody else.
Raymond Towler, in this case, to vacate the conviction is granted.
He wears a half smirk, but his eyes say it all. This never should have happened to me. It's a terrible thing to have happened, but I think he'll be okay in the end. When a news reporter asks him how he feels, Raymond is finally able to crack a smile. Lewis Taylor speaks out after serving more than 40 years of a life sentence he had no right being given. At age 16, the Arizona man was arrested in 1970 after police picked him up on a very vague description for a hotel fire that cost lives and property. In 2013, they recreated the scene using special techniques and ruled that the hotel fire was probably an accident. You can hear the raw pain in his voice as he describes how he feels.
I had no other choice. I wasn't going to let him take another minute, another hour. Another decade for me. It's something I didn't do, so. The county attorney didn't want to do the honorable thing, by curing the injustice.
Battling against a system that was not going to give him a fair trial.
They did a bad deed. Should have never happened.
because they could not prove he was guilty. They could also not prove he was innocent. As such, he was unable to sue for compensation. Even the Supreme Court refused to hear his case. To me, not being compensated for spending most of your life in jail is a second injustice that's almost as great as the first. In my opinion, the court should have to first prove he is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt if they want to deny him restitution. Otherwise, not being compensated for a wrongful conviction is simply not fair. I've got a challenge for you. Since you've made it this far, why not like this video and hit subscribe in the next 5 seconds? Because I upload 4 new scary videos every week. If you're curious about what I look like in real life, then go to my Instagram at DylanIsChillinYT and tap that follow button to find out. Number 1. At 14 years old, John Bunn was convicted for making an off-duty corrections officer go away. There's only one problem. He was innocent this whole time. He was interviewed and identified in a police lineup. This was all the evidence that police needed to send him away for a long time, 17 years to be precise. The detective who was in charge of the case was later found to be of questionable character. Accusations that he fabricated evidence and misled witnesses led to the charges being thrown out. He shakes and cries as he is exonerated, barely able to contain himself as the judge clears him of his conviction. All he can do is take 3 deep breaths as a single tear rolls down his face.
Has been waiting for this moment since 1991.
The judge shows the most compassion out of any other judge on this list and simply holds his hand to let him know his voice is finally being heard. He lets her do so, but he is shaking with emotion the entire time. If only other people responsible for his accusation had been this kind and actually listened, then maybe it never would have happened in the first place. A man is holding very still with his arm out at an odd angle. That's because he doesn't want to attract the wrath of this dangerous little fellow who somehow slithered into a scary situation.